Inside were medical records, therapy notes, and journal entries chronicling Michael's silent battle with depression that had begun shortly after his promotion, a struggle he had hidden from Sarah out of shame and fear of appearing weak. The final document was a resignation letter Elise had drafted but not yet submitted to Vertex. "I didn't come here to defend what happened between us," Elise said, meeting Sarah's confused gaze. "I crossed professional and ethical boundaries I never should have approached. But what started as attraction became something else when I recognized signs of depression I've seen in my own family." The revelation that followed stunned Sarah more than any confession of an affair could have. Elise had lost her younger brother to suicide 2 years earlier after a similar hidden struggle with depression. Her connection with Michael had evolved from inappropriate flirtation to genuine concern when she recognized the warning signs no one else had noticed, including Sarah. "He needs help, not me," Elise concluded. "And despite everything, he loves you in a way he could never love anyone else. I'm leaving Vertex and starting a position in Seattle next month. What happens now is between you two. But I couldn't leave without making sure he wouldn't make the same mistake my brother did, suffering alone until it was too late." As Elise's car disappeared down the street, Sarah sat motionless, the morning sun warming papers that had completely transformed her understanding of the man she had shared her life with for 8 years. The reunion between Sarah and Michael didn't happen with dramatic flair or grand gestures. Instead, it began in the sterile waiting room of a therapist's office, both of them clutching coffee cups and avoiding each other's eyes until their names were called. "I didn't know how to tell you I was drowning," Michael admitted in that first session. "Everyone at work saw me as this unstoppable success story, and at home, you needed me to be the husband you deserved. There was nowhere I could just be broken." The healing wasn't instantaneous or easy. Trust, once fractured, could only be rebuilt in tiny increments. Sarah moved back home after 2 weeks, but into the guest bedroom. Michael started medication and regular therapy. The communications with Elise stopped completely, though Sarah had, in a moment of grace that surprised them both, told Michael he could thank her for potentially saving his life. 3 months later, at a follow-up appointment with Michael's psychiatrist, Sarah found herself alone in the waiting room when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "How is he?" The Seattle area code told her immediately who it was from. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah replied simply, "Getting better. Thank you." She then deleted the exchange, not out of secrecy, but because some chapters needed to remain firmly closed. 6 months after the morning on her mother's porch, Sarah watched Michael laughing with friends at a dinner party they were hosting, their first since everything had happened. The medication had balanced his chemistry, but it was the honesty that had truly transformed him. Gone was the exhausting perfection he tried to maintain. In its place was something more human and ultimately more lovable. Later that night, as they cleaned dishes side by side, Michael asked the question that had hung between them for months. "Do you think you'll ever completely trust me again?" Sarah considered this as she dried a wineglass. "I trust the you that exists now, the one who isn't hiding anything. That's more real than what we had before." She placed the glass in the cabinet. "What about you? Do you still think about her?" Michael's honesty came without hesitation. "Not in the way you fear. I think about how sometimes the people who wound us most deeply can also be catalysts for the changes we desperately need." He turned to face her fully. "I think about how I almost lost everything that matters chasing something that didn't." As they turned out the lights and headed upstairs together, Sarah realized the true shock of their story wasn't the betrayal or even Elise's unexpected intervention. It was discovering that a marriage could break completely and still be rebuilt into something stronger, more honest, and ultimately more loving than what had existed before. The perfect couple was gone forever, but in their place stood 2 flawed, authentic people choosing each other with their eyes wide open. Sarah and Michael Thompson had been married for 8 years, their love story beginning with a chance encounter at a rainy bus stop that had blossomed into what everyone called a picture-perfect marriage. Michael had recently landed a promotion at Vertex Marketing, becoming the youngest project manager in the company's history. Sarah, who had put her accounting career on hold to launch her own bookkeeping business, watched with a mixture of pride and a twinge of something unnamed as Michael's professional star rose. Their home life had settled into comfortable patterns. Tuesday takeout nights, weekend hikes with their rescue dog Baxter, and monthly dinner parties with their close-knit group of friends. But beneath the surface of their Instagram-worthy life, subtle cracks had begun to form. Michael's long hours left Sarah alone more often, and their conversations had gradually shifted from dreams and desires to schedules and shopping lists. Everything changed at Vertex's annual holiday gala. Sarah wore a black dress she'd saved 3 months for, hoping to reignite the spark that had been flickering lately. Instead, she found herself watching from across the room as Elise Martinez, the new international marketing specialist with credentials from Paris and Milan, laughed at Michael's jokes with her hand resting casually on his suit jacket sleeve. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't Elise's model-like beauty or her perfectly accented English. It was the way Michael's eyes remained fixed on Elise's face, a look of fascination Sarah hadn't seen directed at her in years. "She's just networking," Michael dismissed later that night as they drove home in silence. That's how things work in her culture. But the image of their heads bent close together haunted Sarah as she lay awake that night, Michael's breathing steady beside her, wondering if what she'd witnessed was simply business or the first sign of something that could unravel everything they'd built. The changes in Michael were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know the topography of his habits as intimately as Sarah did. A new cologne appeared in their bathroom. Casual Friday jeans were replaced with tailored slacks. Dinner conversations became peppered with Elise suggested and Elise mentioned, each reference landing like a small stone in Sarah's stomach. 3 weeks after the holiday party, Sarah surprised Michael at work with lunch, something they used to do regularly. The receptionist's sympathetic smile should have been her first warning. When she rounded the corner to Michael's office, she saw them through the glass wall. Michael and Elise huddled over his computer, her dark hair falling forward as she leaned in, their shoulders touching. It wasn't scandalous, yet something in their comfortable proximity felt more intimate than if she'd caught them kissing. Michael's face when he spotted her contained a flash of something: guilt, annoyance, before lighting up with manufactured enthusiasm. Elise's smile never reached her eyes as she extended her hand to Sarah, the famous Sarah. "Michael has told me everything about you." The emphasis on everything hung in the air between them. That night, Sarah's phone pinged with a notification from an unfamiliar number, a single image of Michael and Elise at what appeared to be a downtown wine bar, their expressions relaxed in a way that suggested this wasn't their first after-work drink. The accompanying text was simple: "Thought you should know." When confronted, Michael exploded with righteous indignation, accusing Sarah of spying and making something out of nothing. Their argument ended with slammed doors and the growing sense that whatever was happening was already beyond Sarah's control. The definitive line was crossed on a rainy Tuesday in March. Sarah had been tracking the growing intimacy through fragments: a suspicious credit card charge at a restaurant they'd never visited, lipstick on a collar that Michael claimed must have happened when Elise hugged everyone goodbye at a team celebration, late-night texts with cryptic references to inside jokes Sarah wasn't part of. Determined to understand what she was up against, Sarah did something she'd never imagined herself capable of. She installed monitoring software on Michael's laptop while he showered. "The moral compromises we make when we feel our world slipping away," she thought, as she closed the computer, feeling both powerful and ashamed. 2 days later, the evidence appeared in brutal clarity. Dozens of email exchanges between Michael and Elise, conversations that had begun professionally but had evolved into deeply personal territory. They discussed their dreams, their childhoods, their disappointments. Most devastating wasn't the expected talk of physical attraction, but Michael's confession to Elise: "Sarah and I have become more like roommates than partners. You make me feel alive again." When Michael returned home that evening to find Sarah sitting in the dark kitchen with printed copies of the emails spread before her, the facade crumbled. "It's not what you think," he began weakly, but they both knew those words had lost all meaning. "Have you slept with her?" Sarah asked, her voice eerily calm. Michael's hesitation before answering no told her everything she needed to know about how close they'd come. But emotionally, she pressed. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered, tears forming. "I don't know who I am anymore or what I want." Sarah stood, gathering the emails into a neat pile. "Well, figure it out quickly, because I won't be your backup plan while you decide." She walked upstairs to pack her bag, knowing her mother's guest room awaited her, leaving Michael staring after her with the sudden realization that he might have already lost everything that truly mattered. 3 days of silence followed. Sarah ignored Michael's increasingly desperate texts while she cycled through rage, grief, and exhaustion at her mother's house. On the 4th morning, as Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunrise and contemplating calling a divorce attorney, a sleek silver car pulled into the driveway. Elise Martinez stepped out, not the confident predator of Sarah's imagination, but a woman whose eyes showed she hadn't slept any better than Sarah had. The shock of seeing her romantic rival appear at this sanctuary froze Sarah in place. "Your mother told me where to find you," Elise explained, her voice lacking its usual polished charm. "May I sit?" What followed defied every expectation Sarah had constructed. Instead of excuses or territorial claims, Elise placed a thick manila envelope between them. "Before you decide anything about your future, you need to see what Michael couldn't tell you himself."